yeah, my ChatGPT writes so bad. And I was like, well, because you're not giving it anything to work
Yeah.
from. You're just asking
Yeah.
it a point blank question and it's essentially guessing. I said, take the whole brand questionnaire, copy paste that into the channel. Like have a different ChatGPT channel for every single effort that you've got going on so that you can reference back all of this like rich content that you're giving it. Because like, of course it's going to spit out like the most basic stuff. But
Yeah.
I think if you're looking at it from more high level is like, instead of considering yourself as the writer, like consider yourself the editor. Like ChatGPT is your writer, you're the editor, and it cannot go to print until it goes through the editor. So it's like, you still have to have, I think, that high level. Greetings and welcome back to the Kiss My Aesthetic podcast. I'm so excited to have Tedi on today. Welcome, Tedi.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
It's going to be a great conversation because you cover a topic that our team does not touch at all. So I'm going to follow my own curiosities here. But for anyone who doesn't know you or follow you yet, can you tell us who you are, what you do, and who you help?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Tedi Bezna. I'm the founder of Searchlight Digital, and we are an all-women search engine marketing agency based in Canada, but we have team members across North America. And we work with entrepreneurs and marketing teams to essentially take the scary out of SEO and provide done-for-you support in an area that's often misunderstood or even missed entirely. And so we have worked across a really wide range of industries and website types. At this point, 7 years in, we've worked on well over 500 different websites. So we're really just experts at coming in and applying our expertise and our research to help improve online visibility and improve conversions for the businesses that we support.
Oh my gosh. And I already have 1,000,005 questions that I know like 6 clients who I need to send this episode to immediately. But like I said, I really don't know much about SEO at all. I'm a fine arts and art history major. So I know the visuals and the branding and I get that part of it. But talk to me about how you even ended up doing SEO and how you describe what it is that you actually do to people who have no idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm always so amazed by people who are like you, who have this incredible vision, who can make things look beautiful, because that's not at all my area of expertise. I'm like the numbers nerd. I'm the spreadsheet girl. I love being behind the scenes with the data. And really, that's how I started my marketing career. I was working at a tech startup that focused on photography, and so very visual. And I was working with these incredible marketers who, again, had this very, keen eye, had a real sense of the brand, a real sense of the vision, but were not as interested in looking at things like Google Analytics or the data on what was performing. They were just, so focused and incredible at what they did for the visuals. And so, as a young up and coming marketer, I thought, okay, great. This is my opportunity to really make my mark. I'd always liked, spreadsheets and finance and data in business school. And so I thought, perfect, this is where I can, really support. So I started working on their SEO and took over their paid advertising. And I really, a couple years in, decided that I wanted to be able to help lots of different businesses. I'd gone really deep for about 3 years on one particular business, but I come from a long line of small business owners and entrepreneurs, and I knew how impactful and how helpful this was for people to thrive online. I had kind of seen from a client side what it was like working with agencies. And I knew that there was a different and a better way to do it that really focused on integrity and not taking people for a ride, but actually giving them the things that they needed to be able to thrive. So I decided to transition to freelancing. I took a government job so that I had a little more stability. And then from there, just built up my freelance career. The pandemic then hit and everyone was going online at once. And so it really was just this moment of, taking off very quickly and saying, okay, let's build this now into an agency, bring on a team. I had 2 little girls within 14 months of each other, also during the pandemic. So it was a very busy time. And so thankfully, I brought on just this fabulous group of women that I work with now to help us grow and expand. So it's been a really
love that.
full and exciting 7 years. But
no kidding.
It's been great.
No kidding. So I think this is what, to your point, like I love doing things that people can see. Like that's my safe space. And I think it's really easy to neglect or ignore the part that helps to build the business that's the behind the scenes, a behind the curtain kind of job. So SEO, in your own words, is what exactly?
Yeah. So SEO is the process of making the most relevant, helpful content that answers what a person is searching for. And from the business side, ultimately leads them towards converting, whatever that looks like for you. So whether that's a product, that's a purchase, if you're a service-based business, we want people to sign up for your newsletter or contact. So really it comes back to clarity and relevancy to make sure that users and search engines know what you do, what you're talking about, and making sure that you're the best match for what people are searching for.
So it's my understanding then that the search engines, their ranking of your website is very much predicated on the quality of content that Google basically is on your site. So talk to us about, first of all, tell me if that's right or wrong. And second of all, talk to me about what are all the different places to embed SEO to make your site, your shop, whatever, more attractive to Google.
Totally. Well, I mean, quality, of course, is a huge part of this. And I think especially with the rise of AI and ChatGPT blowing up over the last, 2 years, really. It's been a great equalizer, but it's also just raised the floor. So a lot of people think, now that I have ChatGPT, like all of my writing is taken care of, but now you need to be better than AI. Like that's now the bar. And so it's been really great for people who maybe weren't very strong writers and can now produce something, thoughtful. But again, it's really about matching what a person is looking for. And so I think when it comes to quality, of course, you want to be thorough. Google also has many different factors. There's like over 200 different factors that go into how something is ranked. But you want to make sure, of course, that, you're providing the answer that people are looking for. And so sometimes that looks like a 2,000-word blog post. Sometimes that looks like a really simple landing page that just says exactly what you do, where you do it, enough information to fill out a contact form, and then the ability to actually reach out. So it really varies. And I think this is something that often gets missed is we talk a lot about like general SEO best practices and what you should do categorically. But SEO and the landscape of search is changing so much that it's really becoming about the keyword that you're trying to rank for. Because if you're trying to rank for something that's super informational and really high level, that's going to need something very different than like a local service provider, like a janitor versus, someone who's trying to talk about, software or, something that's really meta and really kind of petty. So it's really about identifying what does Google value in, the websites that are ranking for that particular keyword. So looking at that landscape on a per keyword basis can be super valuable.
Maybe we can run through some examples. So I'm thinking talk to me about an SEO project that's like very straightforward and then one that is more complex. Like you were just saying, like I've got to imagine people that need what we do are not necessarily searching brand designer, like general, but they may be frustrated and like hitting a lot of the same roadblocks with like my marketing things, like what to do, how to create a sales deck, how to do a da-da-da, why my business cards look like shit. Like, do you know what I mean? So it's like, I feel like the path, and this is where we've also struggled with pitching, why we've had so much success on socials. I'm much more a show instead of tell person. Let me show you what I can do, because there is some nuance to our service, and like just pitching a business and being like, hey, your stuff sucks, like can we redo it, is pretty harsh. So like how would you approach something like that is a service-based business that's like a little bit more complicated? Or maybe I'm just making this out to be harder in my head than it actually is.
No. I'll give a couple different examples, but really when we approach a website, there's different types of keywords that are appropriate on different pages of your site. So when you think about like your homepage, that's sort of the umbrella under which everything lives. So that's going to be sort of those high level, somewhat generic keywords that want to encompass everything that you do. Then we look at things like service pages. And so that's going to start to get much more specific. And one of the greatest opportunities that we've really seen, especially with service providers, is if you're doing, brand design, who do you do it for? Are you a brand designer for restaurants, for hospitality, for coaches, for therapists? Starting to try to cut through the noise. And I think that that's something that people often will look at the keywords and they're like, people search for this 20,000 times a month. This is the best keyword. But it tends to be really high level and generic and competitive. So starting to cut through that noise and getting specific is really valuable for giving your site and that page a chance to rank and drive meaningful and relevant traffic to your site. Then, of course, we're going to have the questions that people are asking. So things like, I'm thinking from a brand design, Squarespace perspective, let's say, how do I, update my logo on a Squarespace site? How do I add a section? How do I make sure that, my brand colors are added to my Squarespace site? All the things that we take for granted is like,
of course,
that's so obvious. It's like, no, that's actually really not obvious.
Well, not anymore on Squarespace. Not with this new editor. My gosh, is it complicated? Anyway,
I'm just an SEO, and it also, has taken me a while to relearn where everything is, where all my settings are. So you have different types of keywords that go in different places. Because, like I said, someone who's asking a question is going to need very different information than someone who's searching for a thing. And so you have these different types of searches around informational, navigational, commercial? Someone looking to buy something. Am I looking for the
Mm,
hours at a certain business? Or am I
mm.
looking for, the answer to a question? All of these things need different types of content on your site. So your strategy kind of matches that.
Okay. Yeah. So like the opposite of a very like heavy investment service-based business might be like a quick product. So your SEO is going to be something totally different. Your strategy is going to be different for something that's a quick transaction under $25 versus something that's like 10, 15, $20,000.
Yes, definitely. Well, and the sales cycle looks so different for something like that. I
Totally.
mean, in our business, the two ends of the spectrum that I can kind of think of is like one end of the spectrum is local service-based businesses. Like we just started working with
Mm-hmm.
someone who does like gutter cleaning in Victoria, British Columbia. And that
Yeah.
is like really
They have a service
specific. We got
area.
one
Yes.
keyword,
Yes.
that we're really going
Yes.
for. And so the way that we're approaching that is very different than another client of ours that is in the women's health space. And their website is entirely about providing women with access to information, specifically around pelvic health. And so this is, extremely
Sure.
information based. We're working alongside physicians for their expertise. We're making sure that we're building authority and, brand online. So
Mm-hmm.
that's something that requires a very different strategy than something like getting people to call you so that you can come and work on their home in your
Sure.
specific city area. So yeah.
Sure. Okay, so talk to us about how blogging plays a role in that, because you pointed out blogging and you also pointed out like specific landing pages.
Yeah.
Where do you like to see businesses spend more or less time? I'm assuming it also depends on the industry, but like
Totally.
if you could give just kind of high level recommendation, these are the things that could make an immediate impact on your SEO.
Yeah, absolutely. I always look to make sure that we have specific service pages built before
Yeah.
we start diving too much into blog posts. So, for example, we work with a
Okay.
lot of like therapists and counselors
Yeah.
and sort of health practitioners. And so they might have, a dozen different niches within their practice. They help people with
Mm-hmm.
anxiety and ADHD and couples counseling. I want to make sure that there's a dedicated, specific, relevant service page for
Okay.
each of those niches. Because what I'm thinking two steps ahead is, well, when we start to build a blog content strategy, I want to have somewhere to send those people. And so if we start to
Mm-hmm.
develop a content strategy around couples counseling, I want to make sure that at the end of that blog post, we can say, we can help you with this. Find out more about this service. So
Mm-hmm.
service pages are such an excellent asset for a business to have. They're great as an ads landing page. They're great for promoting on social media. Obviously
Mm-hmm.
amazing for SEO. That's where we see a lot of
Mm-hmm.
traffic for our clients. But once you have those foundational pieces and you have a dedicated service page for each of your services or each of your offerings, then starting to build out the blog, it's a really great way to demonstrate your expertise, to diversify your keywords so that you're catching people at different levels of awareness of their problem. Like we kind of said, there's going to be people who are like, why is my website so ugly versus people who are like, I'm ready to purchase a brand, a branding experience. So you're able to target people at different moments and then pull them into your site to, be able to actually engage with
Make
them.
that conversion. Okay, yeah. I'm going to call myself out. I'm like a horrendous blogger. I write one blog a year. It's my trend report. And then I never look back at it ever again. And it gets crazy high views because it's a trend report. People pass it around and I spend 40 hours researching it and I'd make all the graphics and all the backlinks and everything. But you've got my wheels spinning of like, there's so many things, like every FAQ that I've ever answered on a discovery call should probably exist as a blog, right?
Yeah. Well, and this is the thing kind of like I mentioned before is like when you're an expert at something, you think that everything you know is so obvious that everyone must know this. And I get in my head about that all the time too. I'm like, oh my gosh, if I do a social media post on this, are people going to think that I'm like a newbie because I'm talking about this? But the people that we want to work with, it's like, they're like, whoa, that's so complicated. So bringing things down and sharing that expertise and not being afraid to share that expertise, I think is such a great way of, demonstrating that you know what you're doing, finding people who are maybe trying to DIY, but then realize how hard everything is because we're experts at it. We do it a long time. They might say, oh, wow, like this person clearly knows. And I think there's a lot of fear as well as service providers of, well, if I tell people how to do it, then they're not going to hire me because now they can do it themselves. But oftentimes, I know I'm the kind of person where it's like, I want to hire an expert. I want to hire someone who does this all day, every day. I don't have the time or energy to like learn how to design a Squarespace website. I want to get someone else to do that for me. So not being afraid, but yeah, the things that we think are silly or little or obvious are hugely valuable and hugely helpful to others.
Is there a percentage breakdown between what you recommend as being like purely educational content versus more editorial style content, like thought leadership and things that are more topical or things that are more, again, like, because that's where my brain wants to go with blogging. Like if I could duplicate myself and like really dedicate time towards blogging, like I'd want to really be more, to showcase more like being at the forefront of being an expert.
Mhm.
And this is a big reason why I have the podcast, because I can have a conversation with someone like yourself and we can talk through a lot of these like higher level ideas. So what do you recommend is like a good split? Or do you really say like, hey, just to establish your blog presence, get all the educational stuff out there? Because like that's going to serve your audience way more.
I mean, it really is also about your distribution strategy. And I always say to people, because people often ask me, oh, well, how many blog posts should I write? And how long should they be? And how often should I be doing this? And I always say it's about your personal capacity to do things.
Yeah.
Like, yes, we've worked on websites where they're pumping out 8 blogs a week and it grows really quickly because we're putting out a ton of content. So like, of course, that's going to grow really quickly. That's not reasonable for most people to, put out that volume. And so I think following your passion, and when you say like, I'm excited to write about this thing, that's great because that probably means you're going to produce more content. The things that are a little bit more like informational, a little more of that educational FAQ style content is probably going to serve you longer term from an SEO perspective because people are going to be searching it over and over. But I would think that things like the thought leadership, that would be super valuable to share on your LinkedIn, on your social media. And again, bring people back to your site, get that traffic going, and that's going to be really beneficial for your site in general. And I will say that the one thing that I see missing often on blog content, whether it's the FAQ style or whether it's informational, and I think this holds back a lot of people from seeing the value of blogging, is around that call to action and that next step, relating it back to what you do. Because I can't tell you how often I'll read someone's blog or I'll see, my clients' old blogs, and at the end it's like, thank you and goodbye. And they just give the information and then it's like so long. And then they say, well, blogging's never really worked for us. And it's like, well, it's because you're not really using it to drive your conversion. So keeping that, conversion optimization in mind as you're building this out is a really great sort of directive.
If your client sites are stunning but stuck on page 7 of Google, it's time to bring in reinforcements. The powerhouse women-led team at Searchlight Digital takes SEO and Google ads off your plate so you can focus on what you do best, creating beautiful brands. Whether you're after a white label partner or strategic consulting, they make optimization feel a whole lot less overwhelming. Use code KMA100 at searchlightdigital.ca for $100 off a 60-minute Pick My Brain call. Because what's the point of great design if nobody can find it? Again, that's searchlightdigital.ca. Use code KMA100 and get found. Well, and we're doing that on social. Like on social media, it's so natural at the end of your post, like head to our contact page or, send us a DM to learn more, click on the link. Like it's so like embedded in the culture of being on social media. So like never leave anybody in a dead end. But yeah, for the website, I mean, that makes a lot of sense too. I think that part comes quite naturally to our team, but I am like interested in like how what's attractive to me about blogging and about like SEO strategy is just like how volatile social media feels these days and how much like apps are changing, getting banned, not getting banned, going away, not going away, fact checking, like you're talking about AI, like there's all this junk. And then also on the flip side, you're saying like now we have ChatGPT to help us write blog posts, kind of, and like the images and things like that. But to these companies, like we already are seeing companies that are churning out mass amounts of AI written articles. How do you cut through that? How do you make sure that your stuff is not only legit and vetted, but is you're keeping up with the pace? Like you said, each according to their own abilities. But as kind of the person that's plugged in the space, what are the things that you're seeing that you're like, oh my God, I wish you wouldn't do that?
Well, I mean, certainly anything that's just like verbatim copy and pasted from ChatGPT, that's not going to probably take you very far. And it's interesting because I remember about a year and a half ago, I was like really in my head about AI and ChatGPT, and it was very like, oh my God, it's going to take my job. Like, what's going on here? But some of the responses from Google and the algorithms and the way that they've been responding to the sort of rise in AI is really around prioritizing humanity. And I think that that's like this great irony and this, wonderful shift towards, well, in a sea of robots, in a sea of AI, it's being human that is actually allowing you to stand out. And so one of the sort of main ranking factors that Google uses when determining quality on a site Previously, the acronym was EAT, so expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. And now they've changed it so that there's an additional E at the beginning of this, which is experience. And so they are looking for someone who can demonstrate that they have lived experience. An AI robot has never taken their kids to Disneyland and knows what the best restaurant is. So having that sense of humanity, and people think that they can identify AI writing. They can't always. Sometimes an AI writer is better than a human writer, depending on the writer. But it really is about what are you putting into it versus what are you getting out? So are you thoughtful with what you're asking for and, how you're building that? But like I said, the floor is now what an AI chatbot can create. So it's actually created, this really beautiful space as well for brands of creating this space where you are now standing out, where there's so much noise, to come through and be really human and to add, humor and to add thought and to add that firsthand experience, the things that make us human and that a robot could never take from us. That's, starting to be the thing that's now differentiating. So,
and using your ChatGPT as a collaborator and not as the end all producer. I think that's the biggest takeaway is that's the biggest feedback I get. I do one-on-one sessions. I had one with a client last week. She's like, yeah, my ChatGPT writes so bad. And I was like, well, because you're not giving it anything to work from. You're just asking it a point blank question and it's essentially guessing. I said, take the whole brand questionnaire, copy paste that into the channel, have a different ChatGPT channel for every single effort that you've got going on so that you can reference back all of this rich content that you're giving it, because of course it's going to spit out the most basic stuff. But I think if you're looking at it from a high level is instead of considering yourself as the writer, consider yourself the editor. ChatGPT is your writer, you're the editor, and it cannot go to print until it goes through the editor. So it's you still have to have, I think, that high level. But I think ChatGPT is interesting to me for things that are really the back end, the SEO, and maybe you can debunk this as well, metadata tags and descriptions, image descriptions, things that just feel more, maybe to me who's not an expert, more monotonous and more of the nitty gritty of the SEO. What do you think about those things?
Yeah, I have been working really hard to try to get ChatGPT to be as good as myself and my team from an efficiency perspective. I have been working on this. I find that in particular, keyword research is still a place that ChatGPT is not able.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's just not able to pull that live data and get accurate information around search volume. So it'll come up with, again, really great starting. So we'll say, this is our client, this is their, their target audience, this is what they do, this is where they do it. And it'll come up with a big old list of, keywords to target. Yeah. We will then put that into our tools. And some of them are zero search, which, has its own kind of theories around. But, it's not always quite there. So again, it's that combination of the efficiency of a chatbot and the efficiency of AI with that human discernment and, being able to, again, convey that from a brand perspective. So we will leverage some tools, but still we have found that there's a lot of value in having a human actually determine, which keywords. The image alt text, though, that one's really interesting. And so there's some tools that we use. Screaming Frog, I don't know if you're familiar with. It basically crawls a website. And so I use that for a lot of back-end sitemap data. It'll tell me what your headings are, what your metadata is. It can dive deep. And so they've now built out a tool where if you upload the URL for your image, it will describe and create meta tags for that. And I work with some other apps through Shopify that will do image alt text en masse for large e-commerce sites. So I think that one probably at scale, AI is a great tool for that, because having a person go through 1,000 SKUs.
It's so daunting. Oh my gosh. For sure, huge. There are images on my website that are, the image title is untitled _artboard 32. That's for sure the image title on probably more than half of the images on my website. And I'm I know I could go back through and redo this, but it's, oh my gosh, is it overwhelming?
It's a lot. And, coming into this year and next, really, for US sites in particular, there's a lot of accessibility laws. And I believe that accessibility is going to start to be even more of a prominent ranking factor. So things that, designers and creatives need to keep in mind as well is when you're building a site, making sure that there's that image alt text, because we see it maybe from an SEO perspective, or a creative might look at it and say, oh, I don't need that. But, people who are using assistive technology, the government, they're going to start to pay attention to that. things like contrast for, backgrounds and text. That's something that I've seen a lot, is like that low contrast. So these are some shifts that are probably going to start to really be hitting, especially the creatives, the designers, the developers, but that we're already thinking of from an SEO perspective, that this could impact rankings, either positively or negatively moving forward.
Right, right. No, these are all good things to keep in mind. And you mentioned also site mapping. I think that when I'm talking to clients and we're helping them like consider their rebranding and their new site, and they're kind of telling me, oh yeah, I DIY'd everything first. And it's just like a 1-page scrolling, like forever scrolling Wix site. Yeah. And I'm like, listen, there's logic behind getting this a little bit more organized. And obviously there's an huge SEO advantage. Oh. But to me, I'm always saying just from a user experience that this is no good. But talk to us about how the search engines look at your site. If you're just having all of your text copied, like just everything you've ever done, the whole site is just 1 page.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, it comes back to that relevancy. So if I'm a person who, again, I'll, use counselors and therapists, because that's, a large bulk of what we do. But, if I'm a person who's coming and I'm looking for couples counseling, and I see a page that talks about couples counseling and art therapy and, counseling for depression and, it's not really helpful to me. You're not really able to go all that deep on any one given topic. And so as a site owner, you're now trying to make one page rank for a dozen different keywords. Whereas if you had one page for one keyword, you could answer those specific FAQs. You could, tell people what to expect. You could speak to my pain and my, my issue that's bringing me to find this solution. You could link to your blog posts about how I can convince my husband to go to couple scouts. Like this is going to sound really personal if my husband's watching. Yeah. This is just an example, but you can really speak to that. Yeah. So again, coming back to that clarity, coming back to relevancy, it's really hard to make one page be relevant for many different things. It's much easier to have it be much more specific. Like you said, from a user perspective, I would love to be able to go to a main navigation, click exactly what I'm looking for, find it, rather than scroll down endlessly. Often on those sites, I'll also see people not have like call to action buttons throughout, and they'll just have a contact form at the bottom. So good luck. People are probably not even finding that. So looking at it from that conversion and user experience lens is super helpful, because yes, it might feel easier to just have one long page, but ultimately it allows you to get deeper on each of the specific aspects when you start to build that sitemap out.
And then drive traffic and then measure your analytics as well, right? So like on your back end of your website, being able to see the web traffic and see the conversions per page makes a lot more sense. Like I always love looking at this with our portfolio work. It's like, I'm really curious of which portfolio project people are clicking on. Like which one are people interested in? And should we be sharing that more if people are interested in it? They're landing on it in the website, but we haven't talked about it on social in a while. Okay, let's use that to inform the latter. You know what I mean? Yeah. What are the things that a brand or a business would need to have prepared to work with you? Like, what would be your dream client checklist? They're like, we have all of this in order and now we're ready to go.
Yeah. I mean, even if people just have a clear understanding of what it is that they're wanting to rank for, who they work with, what they do, that's usually enough for us to get started. Ideally, the website is in working condition. We've worked on some websites that are in less than working condition. But, a lot of the people that we work with have built a website and they either, paid someone else to do it, or they built it themselves a really long time ago. Then they have never touched it again. And this is a very common refrain is, I'll do SEO later on. We'll come back to that. And so if someone had previously set up a Google Analytics or a Google Search Console, that's like a gift from the heavens for us, because it's so rare. And we have some of that historical data to look back on. That's really awesome and helpful. But we're able to do a lot with a little, thankfully. But, the technical back end is really where we find the most challenges, where we have to kind of build things up to level and then be able to, build it on top of that. And the data and analytics is super valuable. And yet it's the thing that I find is missing the most often is, a lot of people just don't know.
They don't know. They don't understand. They don't understand a click rate. They don't understand a bounce rate. They don't understand like any of these metrics. And we find this with social media as well. Is like, okay, what is the difference between engagement and reach and views and all of these things? Like these are all things that sound so synonymous. So I've got to imagine you guys have a pretty like in-depth like dashboard that you're taking people through. What other questions do you feel like you usually get in the beginning of the process of working with someone that you're like, yeah, literally everyone asks us this?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, again, the SEO in general feels like a bit of a black hole to them. And so oftentimes people just don't even have the language. It's
Yeah.
interesting to me because I think people feel a lot more comfortable with social media marketing and email marketing because they see themselves as a user of that. They're like, I have an
Mm-hmm.
Instagram account. I've sent emails before. So
Mm-hmm.
there's that level of comfort and that understanding of like, here's what the back end looks like. Whereas they don't feel like an SEO user. And so they're like, well, I know it's code. It's all very technical. It's all just code. So that often is kind of the biggest question. And so we find ourselves really walking through the basics with a lot of people. And, I show people a Google search of like, here's what your website looks like in search. Here's what, what you're missing. Here's what needs to be added. A lot of the default settings on, a person's website leave a lot to be desired from an SEO perspective. I think there's also a lot of misunderstanding when people have paid for a designer or developer to create their website and they assume that it has been SEO optimized.
Sure,
and I think a lot of people sort of think that SEO and design and developers and copywriters are just like kind of all the same thing.
Yes.
and that if one person has worked on it, then it must have been accounted for and don't really realize the differing skill sets there. So oftentimes I have to say like, no, this website that you just paid $10,000 for doesn't is not ranking, isn't indexing. Like there's this sort of next phase of what needs to be done for them. So oftentimes even just getting the basics in there around, I've mentioned this a couple times, clarity. What do you do? Who do you help? Where do you do it? And really these core things are often missing on a person's website in their copy and their meta tags. So adding that is a really quick win.
Well, and we're also in a world where like half of our clients aren't even US based. Like we can work with anyone from anywhere. So it's like the location versus like my parents who have an interior design business, like they have a service area and they're not going outside of their service areas because their contractors don't travel outside of the service area. So it is kind of, I can see how it's more complicated, more complex. But let's say someone who's listening to this episode is actually a website designer wanting to get into website design. They could partner with an agency like yours, or where do you recommend that they go to start to learn? Like this is baseline expectation for SEO. And then if you want things more complicated, pass them over to us kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we work with a lot of copywriters, web designers, web developers, people to make sure that SEO is baked in right from the start, because that's ideal. Is as soon as a website is launched, if you have some of these foundations, that's super helpful. There is a lot of really great information just online about SEO basics. So for, web designers and developers, I'm like, please just make sure that an H1 is baked into this page, because I cannot tell you how many freshly designed websites I work on that don't have an H1. And now I'm the guy who has to go in and put like some ugly giant header in the top of the page. Please design it and make it beautiful so that I can just, add it or update it as needed. But so a lot of those kind of basics can be lost. The times where especially I say to people like bring in an SEO early is if you are changing platforms. So if you're going from like WordPress to Shopify, WordPress to Squarespace, oftentimes that is going to start to mess with like the URL structure and you can redirect. If a client comes to you and says, oh yeah, we want to take our really old, complicated website and streamline it down to like 5 pages. That's when you want to bring an SEO in, because we might look back and say like, oh, actually, please do not delete this page. This is really valuable. And if you are going to, let's make sure that it's reflected in another page, or this is what this page is ranking for. How can we, make a strategy to make sure that we're not losing that traffic?
Right.
Again, I think it's just such a black box for people that they don't realize that like, oh, I made this switch. One thing I see with a lot of web designers and developers is they will, when they're changing the domain to the new site, they'll either add or remove www from the beginning of the domain. And Google now sees that as a different website. And depending on how your Google Search Console and your analytics are set up, it can also impact your data. So it seems like something so minor, it's something you wouldn't even think of. You're like, oh, sure, whatever. Let's just remove the www. It makes it more streamlined and like it looks nice. And now you've like made it, really serious.
Hurt yourself. Oh my gosh, I didn't even know this. Wow.
Having an SEO on hand is super helpful. I've also just done like consulting calls with quite a few people who build templates, who work, and do a lot of, web design and development, where they're like, I just want to make sure that as I'm building this, I'm doing the right things. And so we've done a lot of strategy calls with people just to make sure that they feel confident and they know moving forward what they need to keep an eye out for, depending on their platform. Of course, again, if you're a Squarespace developer versus or designer versus a Shopify designer, 2 totally different things. So There's a lot of nuance based on the platform, based on who you work with.
Yeah,
So
no kidding.
it's always
No
good to have
kidding.
a friendly neighborhood SEO.
Oh, yeah. No, definitely. I think the question that really I've been getting a ton, and maybe because it was just like a crazy fourth quarter, we're doing social media management, is the question that we get from clients is, when am I going to see ROI from this?
Yeah.
And I have to remind them that like marketing and sales are two different departments. Like marketing supports sales, but sales, like the way things are priced, whether people buy or not, how they take action, what the world is doing, like there's so many other factors. You're nodding your head, so I'm assuming you've been in this situation before. But how do you kind of talk to clients through that? Like, okay, yeah, you just spent a pretty penny on SEO. This is long game. This is long, steady traffic. This is not a turn the faucet on and all of a sudden we're going to be making money. How do you kind of walk them through that?
Yeah. It's funny. I actually have in our like welcome guide for, when new clients join us, I have what is somewhat of a Venn diagram of SEO versus CEO. And so there are things that I'm in control of that I can do. Yep. And then there are some things that only you can handle. I can have you showing up in the local pack for, Gutters, Victoria. Sure. But if your admin assistant doesn't answer the phone, I can't help you with that. Or, I can get you, ranking for dance costumes from Canada. But if your price is $600 and not many people are willing to pay that, that's kind of a business decision. So I try to make clear from the start what I have control over, what SEO can do, and what are ultimately business decisions. And a part of our onboarding, actually, I ask this less for my benefit and more so for my clients. I always ask, what is a lead worth to you? Like, what is a new client or an average purchase worth to you? Because if you're a person who's like, well, I sell the service package on average, it's, $2,500. Okay. Sure. So if you get 2 new people from SEO, you've just paid for your whole service. Okay. Yeah. That helps to kind of reframe like, all right, this actually, I did get my ROI. If you sell $20 tchotchkes, that obviously we're working at scale, but, framing what is ROI and again, having the data to be able to back it up is hugely helpful. And this is something I think a lot of marketers even struggle with, is like having the proof that what we're doing actually is driving an impact. And that's why when we start working with anyone, the first thing that we do is get that GA4, get the Google Analytics installed on the website, get conversion tracking set up, the conversions that matter to our clients. So whether that's contact forms or, pressing the email us button or whatever that is, starting to track that right away, because that way, business owners often go by how things feel. It feels busy. It feels slow. I don't feel like anything has changed. And so if we have the data and the analytics to back it up and say, actually, you've just seen a, 200% increase year over year.
Oh, completely.
You go. So it's so important to have that.
We deal with it on the social media side as well, because it's the same thing. It's like, it's much harder. Yes, having hard metrics is so important, and it's really important to track analytics, but it is much harder to measure brand perception or measure awareness, like measure functionality, right? Like, yes, you can to a degree, but also like the website click rate is and bounce rate is also a reflection of how your site is even designed in the first place. Like, there's so many factors that go into it. So it is one of those things where it's an education piece as well. But I think it's an important conversation to have on the client side of like, I want you to have realistic expectations here. Like this, this is part of an ecosystem, right? And like this, your SEO helps your PR opportunities, which helps your social media, which helps get you the visibility to the client that's actually going to pay you the money.
Yeah. Nothing's an island. And I think when people are trying to look for the silver bullet of like, well, if only I had this will solve all my problems. No. And obviously I believe very deeply in the value of SEO. I always consider it to be like a foundational marketing activity that supports any other marketing that you're doing. I mean, when I'm talking with people, I say, if you're, really putting it out on Instagram and you're hustling there, great. We're going to want to make sure that when they land on your website, it loads quickly. It says what you do, who you serve, where you do it, that the information is obvious, that the navigation is good. If you're sending out newsletters, a lot of people are like, what do I put in my newsletters? Great. Here's where your blogging strategy comes in. Here's where your service pages come in. So it really feeds into so many other things. But when it comes to that length of time of like, well, when am I going to see results? People like to kind of throw around 6 to 12 months because that is a good expectation setting. Oftentimes that's how long it takes for Google to crawl your pages. But harkening back to the beginning of our conversation, it's so specific to the keyword. And oftentimes people get one keyword in mind, like, I want to rank for this and only this, and this is my ultimate, goal. But realistically, once you optimize your website for, 1 or 20 phrases, however big your website is, you start to get these variations. You start to get, multiple phrasings of the same thing or offshoots of that similar, way of framing it that you framed on your website.
Right.
So diversity, I'm always looking at diversification, because if you're relying on one keyword, that's a really vulnerable place to be. If you're getting all of your traffic from one single search term, you're an algorithm change or competitor move away from, losing it big. So that's why I always look to diversify and make sure that we're looking at things holistically instead of just focusing on that like one single keyword. Obviously, we can use it as a North Star, but if you're, again, in a small town and you're the only one who does your thing, or, it's you and 3 other people, then yeah, you're probably going to be number one within the next like 4 weeks. But if it's much more competitive, that's when we start to look for things sort of around where it's like, website templates, very competitive. Website templates for, for counselors, website templates for coaches.
Yeah.
Now we're breaking through a little bit and getting more valuable traffic there.
Right. What's your best recommendation for the small business owners of like good SEO hygiene? How often should they be checking up, tuning up, building it if they're not working with someone ongoing? What's your recommended like pacing for just kind of auditing their SEO strategy and finding ways to optimize it?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, once you've launched your site or once you've become aware of SEO and the need to optimize your website, I would first Google yourself and see what comes up, because people are often really surprised at what comes up when Googling their own business.
Your high school max prep stats from your volleyball team. Yeah,
exactly. Or Googling yourself always. That's a good one. But, when you're Googling your business, like I've had people who, have an abbreviation of their business name as their website, like as their page title, because that's the setting on the back end of their website. And they assumed that I was coming up for, this particular search term, right? My full business name that says what we do, that says where we do it. And actually I'm coming up for an acronym or an abbreviation. Like that's very
unrelated.
helpful.
Yes, true.
Or, people whose pages aren't even showing up correctly on Google, or their Facebook page is showing up ahead of them. So even just seeing what's currently there is super eye-opening and helpful. Going into the basic SEO settings on your website, and the page title and the H1, that primary header, are the 2 places that I would look at first, because that's really what Google uses at a high level to determine what is this page talking about? What is on this page? And so if you include what you do, where you do it, if relevant, and ideally, again, who you serve, if that is included in your page title and your main heading on any given page on your site, you're already ahead of probably at least half of your competitors, because they haven't looked at their website either. So making sure that you're clear. And I think this is the dance that I always do as well with, brand designers and like the creatives of marketing, is this dance between, brand voice, brand tone, and clarity. So even having other people in your life look at your website and provide you with feedback. I think we all have the family member or the friend who doesn't actually know what we do for a living. Get them to look at your website and say, can you figure out what I do? And then reach out to me to get that service. Okay, do I have, the contact forms embedded on each of my service pages instead of just on my contact page? Am I clear with what it is that we're providing on each of those pages? So if a human can understand what it is that you do on your site, that means that Google can probably understand too.
Oh, we love it. This was so helpful. And I feel like I could keep talking. I have so many more questions. So I'll definitely talk to you after this. But for anyone who wants to work with you or take advantage of, you have a little something to share with our audience, please tell us what that is and how they can get a hold of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I offer a Pick My Brain package, which is basically a recorded 60-minute call where we go over your SEO questions, conundrums, anything that you want to go over, troubleshoot in real time. And so I have a $100 off code for the listeners. I think it's my aesthetic podcast. So I'm really excited to connect and help people, because again, SEO can feel very overwhelming. And sometimes we just need to know what's the lay of the land, what's going on here. Of course, we do also on-site optimization packages. If you're a local service provider, we have specific local SEO packages, as well as ongoing support, content strategies. So really anything that you need to make sure that you are showing up in Google for your target search terms, we're excited to help.
And your website again for the people?
Yes,
and
sorry.
The socials?
So Instagram, on Instagram, we're Searchlight Digital. And then our website is searchlightmarketing.ca.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time today, Tedi. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Guys, if you love the episode, make sure you send it to a friend, you save it, you share it, you comment on it, anything like that. And we will link to everything in the show notes for them. So thanks so much for joining us, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks, Tedi.
Thank you.
Bye.